This morning, I'm one-on-one with Brooklyn Congresswoman Yvette Clark, an early proponent of impeachment proceedings against President Trump. Where do we go from here? Plus, she speaks out on immigration, housing, and gun violence.
Now from 42nd and 2nd, this is New York's very own PIX11 News Closeup with Marvin Scott.
Good morning. Democrats have now taken the next step in their efforts to impeach President Trump. From their private behind closed doors inquiry, they've now voted to go public with formal procedures and open public hearings. This morning's guest is a 7-year member of Congress. Yvette Clark represents the 9th Congressional District in Brooklyn. She began calling for impeachment proceedings 2 years ago. Good to have you on PIX11 News Close-Up. I don't know how you haven't been on here previously, but good to have you with us now.
It's great to be with you, Marvin.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Lots of questions for you, but before we go to that, let's take this report from John Mueller on what happened on Thursday.
The resolution is adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
A divided House sent a message. The impeachment inquiry into President Trump is moving forward.
It's a sad day because nobody comes to Congress to impeach a president of the United States. No one.
The step is significant. For the first time in the Trump presidency, representatives voted on record and set rules to make the impeachment process more public.
As the inquiry proceeds, we'll decide whether we'll go forward with impeachment. That decision has not been made.
At issue, a whistleblower complaint alleging the president pressured Ukraine to investigate a Democratic rival. The political polarization into the Democratic-led investigation on full display. No Republican voted for the measure. 2 Democrats voted no on the resolution.
Not only did every single Republican reject the Soviet-style impeachment process, but we were even joined by Democrats who couldn't stand it anymore.
Almost immediately, President Trump reacted to the decision, tweeting, "The greatest witch hunt in American history."
In the sham that has been putting this country through this nightmare.
This is the 3rd time the House of Representatives voted on an impeachment inquiry into a sitting president. What's unclear? How quick the investigation will be. What is clear? The process will consume the country's attention before the 2020 elections.
And it certainly will. And you started calling for impeachment back in 2017. Now, you have this vote yesterday to go public because the Republicans have been complaining everything was all secret behind closed doors. So now that you're going to go over the proceedings, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to come up with those articles of impeachment. Is that correct?
It doesn't necessarily mean that. This is where we really delve into the facts. There are 4 different committees that are going to be looking at all of the investigations, all of the various individuals who have come forward with their material witness information, and we're going to go methodically through the facts of the matter.
Now, Speaker Pelosi said the inquiry proceeds we will decide whether we'll go forward with impeachment. The decision has not yet been made. At what point does that decision get made?
It gets made when we have laid out all of the facts before the American people. We are very clear that the American people are focused on this now. We have made it very plain that there's an abuse of power here. There is a betrayal of constitutional norms, of the Constitution itself, and that there's corruption engaged here. We now have to lay that out for the American people to see exactly what it was that Donald Trump engaged in. Clearly, with the whistleblower coming forward, and now we've had up to 11 actual witnesses, we are clear that Donald Trump has been in violation of the Constitution of the United States.
Now, are these witnesses who you've spoken to behind closed doors, are they going to go public at these
Absolutely.
public hearings?
I mean, that's what we needed to do. And then let me say what the behind closed doors. We have an intelligence committee in the House of Representatives. And what they do is they bring into a classified setting individuals who need to bring information to the Congress. This is not something new. This is something that Republicans and Democrats engage in alike. It's a committee that has both Democrats and Republicans on it. So it's disingenuous to say that this was done in secret. This was done to preserve the sanctity of the information that was being brought to us so that we could make sure that, one, the information being brought was truthful, and two, we could document before we bring it to the Judiciary Committee, the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, as well as the Financial Services Committee, what we have seen and what we've heard.
Now, you have not one affirmative vote from the Republicans, and that was expected.
Well, we did. We've got Justin Amash. He's still a registered Republican, though he's more independent at this stage.
But it was overwhelmingly
Overwhelmingly
right.
Democrat.
But now, the president and the Republicans say this is a witch hunt. You've been holding this inquiry for a couple of months now. Have you found the smoking gun? Was there a quid pro quo with the president and the Ukrainian president?
Based on the information that we've received thus far, and the memorandum that the White House released itself, there was clearly a quid pro quo. And, you know, it jeopardizes our national protection, our national defense. It has implications for the upcoming election. We've got to get to the bottom of this. We've got to make sure that all of those facts are laid out so that the American people are very clear. And we're very sober and very focused. This is not a circus environment that we're trying to create. And unfortunately, we've had to come to this point with Donald Trump. But what he has done and embarked upon is dangerous. It's in direct violation of the Constitution of the United States. And we cannot have that type of behavior without there being checks and balances.
How do you respond to the people who say, this is all political?
Well, you know, we've got to get beyond that type of cynicism. This is dangerous. When you have an American ally like the Ukraine being jeopardized with the funding needed for them to protect themselves against the aggression and the really hot war with Russia. Let's also bear in mind that this funding was sanctioned by the United States Congress, both the House and the Senate, and it's being withheld to receive information about a political rival. That's the one thing that I think our founders were concerned about, which is why we have the remedy of impeachment.
During that whole procedure of the vote on Thursday, there was a quotation from the Federalist Papers of Alexander Hamilton, if I may quote, that Hamilton argued that the process was bound to be compromised, whatever its exact ramifications. Here's the quote. There will always be the greatest danger that the decision will be regulated more by the comparative strength of parties than by the real demonstration of innocence or guilt. Isn't there truth in that?
Well, you know, I think there is some truth in that. We've seen examples of that throughout history. However, there's an existential threat when you have the leader of the free world, the president of the United States, engaged in quid pro quo activities. This can have ramifications for generations to come. And if we don't answer it, we have now set a precedent for anyone who's elected to the highest office in the land to conduct themselves in a corrupt manner. And that will mean the demise of our democracy.
Before I go to break, how long do you expect these proceedings to last?
Well, we're going to be on an expedited track. We are going to be trying to get this done as quickly as possible. We're moving into a holiday season, but at the same time, we want to make sure that every fact that we can uncover, every subpoena that we have issued is answered, and that the American people see the case laid out before them. Hopefully that can happen before the end of the year. If not, possibly early January.
Well, the House is now on a 2-week recess.
Yes.
This is going to carry into the presidential campaign. It's going to become the prominent issue?
It's possible. It's possible. You know, let's also bear in mind that the House of Representatives has been doing its job. We have over 252 pieces of legislation passed by the House sitting in the graveyard in the Senate. Mitch McConnell, the Senate, has not done their job.
I want to talk more about that. I want to give you a chance to take a breath. We have so many other issues to talk about. We're going to take a break. Stay with us as we continue our conversation with Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. We'll be right back.
You're watching New York's very own PIX11 News Closeup with Marvin Scott.
Back now with Brooklyn Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. We've talked about the impeachment, but I know you've been quite vocal on immigration policies.
Absolutely.
You've introduced legislation dealing with it.
That's
and
right.
in particular, you've been concerned about the holding of children at the southern border. What are you doing to counter the administration's policy?
Well, we've introduced H.R. 6. I'm an original co-sponsor of this bill. That, first of all, addresses the issue of DACA recipients, individuals who are here with under temporary protected status. DACA recipients are individuals who were brought here as children and know no other nation other than the United States of America. Many of them are young adults now, and they are in limbo. The border situation has been an atrocious
You've been
one.
down there?
I'm actually going to be heading there next month. The concern that I have is that the human rights violations that have taken place in our names cannot stand. The cruelty of separating children from their parents, and many of whom have not been reunited yet, many of whom have been treated horrendously, many of whom we're hearing are in the proceedings to be adopted. We're in the midst of trying to address that issue.
So what would your legislation do?
Well, what my legislation would do is it would establish a 9/11 style commission to look at in depth what took place under this administration and what remedies we need going forward to make sure that it never happens again.
All right, you have something else now that you're planning an awareness march next week in Brooklyn.
Next
because
weekend.
You're talking about next year's census, which is very important, of course, but you want to make sure that immigrants are counted in that census. I know there was a
Absolutely.
battle the president had. The Supreme Court overruled him that you couldn't
But
block
the
them.
citizenship
Right.
question on the census. Yeah, there are a couple of things. There are children in my constituency who have been really empathetic with the children on the border. We're having a children's march next weekend, and the children want their voices heard as well, so we're encouraging that. The census, we have got to make sure that those who have been made to fear the federal government are empowered to make sure that they're counted. Everything within our districts, our health care, education, preschool seats, everything really hinges on us making sure that everyone is counted and that we emphatically say that we're here and we're adding value to our society.
Are you talking about including undocumented immigrants?
Including undocumented immigrants. Many people are in between status, and that's one of the things that I think we don't get into the weeds with about as much. There are individuals who are here on various visas that are in the midst of regularizing their status here in the United States, applying for green cards. Those individuals should not be under threat. They should go through the adjudicative process and be given the rights that they deserve.
Now, New York is a sanctuary city where we're protecting these undocumented immigrants against the wishes of the current administration. What are you doing? What efforts are you making through your position to protect them?
Well, one of the things that I've done is, particularly those who have green cards, is I've made sure that we educate about citizenship. And we've had quite a number of individuals who have gone on through that educational process and are now citizens of the United States. I think that oftentimes immigrants come to the United States, they think at some point they're going to go back to their home of origin, but end up living out their lives here in the United States, contributing to our tax base, building businesses, establishing families here, and it's important that we encourage and empower them to do so.
Now, immigration legislation is one of those things in the backlog. You know, both in the House, but you say a lot of that has gone over to the Senate, particularly gun control.
Yes.
And I mean, we've had so many mass shootings in this country.
Horrendous.
Brooklyn has had a spate of gun violence, and yet it continues. Mitch McConnell, he keeps holding the legislation, doesn't bring to a vote for background checks.
It's really disheartening. And quite frankly, we know what needs to be done to protect the American people. They need to pick up that legislation
How do we
right
get it out of
now.
the logjam?
Well, elections have consequences, and it's important that people across this nation who are fed up with the carnage in our nation speak out and speak out through their votes.
It's something, it's troubling. We hear about it, and it seems to be all we hear is impeachment, 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 and nothing is happening in our Congress. With all due respect to you, in the Congress, in the House of Representatives, or the Senate, everything is backed up. We need infrastructure legislation. We need immigration legislation. And the impeachment is overruling everything. We're not running this country.
I think that that's where a lot of the media focus has been. I wish we could get as much attention to the 250-odd bills that we have passed in the House of Representatives that are languishing in Mitch McConnell's graveyard.
Okay, that's why I have you on a program like this, so we can learn more.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this, because you're a voice for the voiceless, and one of the things you are looking for, and I know it was something that was quite contentious here in New York before it was passed, giving former prisoners, those convicted of felonies or other crimes, giving them the right to vote. I know there was a voice against it. It finally was approved here in the New York State, and you're out there working for them and encouraging them to get out and vote next week.
Absolutely. Pardon my vote. These are individuals who have done their time. They have paid their debt to society. It's only natural that they be given full citizenship. And full citizenship means the right to vote. These are individuals who want to make it right with their communities. They've committed a crime, they've done the time. They now want to be able to engage to help communities to flourish. And that's why I think it's very important that these individuals use that power to select those who will represent us.
Now,
in our
after the
legislature.
taping of this program today, you have a town hall meeting on dealing with that, where you're having former prisoners going to speak why they want to be a part of the whole voting process next week.
Absolutely. Like I said, I think that there are many who were incarcerated for whatever reasons who want to make it right with the communities from which they've come. These are individuals who, have done their time. They're looking for ways to be productive in society. And one of those ways is using full citizenship. And that means that you're able to vote, you're able to work, and you're able to add value to the communities that they live in.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back and talk about something technology. You're on a committee in Congress that deals with technology.
Yes.
We're going to talk about facial recognition in public housing, which you're opposed to. We'll be right back with Congresswoman Yvette Clark. Stay with us.
You're watching New York's very own PIX11 News Closeup with Marvin Scott.
Back now with Congresswoman Yvette Clark, and someone told me I said 7 years in Congress. Should be 7 terms.
That's right. I'm in my 13th year now.
And you're up for re-election next year.
Yes.
And you are vice chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee, which under that purview is dealing with technology.
Absolutely.
And part of that is biometrics.
Yes.
Biometrics, simply facial recognition. And apparently there's some landlords in your district who are using that as security measures, and you have a concern about that going into public housing.
I do. I have concern about it overall because it's technology that has not been fully tested. And the testing that has been done has shown false positives, particularly in communities of color. It has not been perfected. It's an invasion of privacy. And I think that before private sector use of this technology, it must be perfected. Individuals must be able to own their own data, which is collected on them. And you have a right to privacy in America.
But it's a good security measure, isn't it?
So think about you're trying to get into your home, and the technology that's being used because you've changed your hairstyle or you've changed your makeup does not allow you admittance into your home. And that is a real possibility. We know that individuals who are darker skinned, individuals, women in particular, who change hairstyles frequently, there have been a lot of false positives there. And aside from that, you should be able to determine for yourself how you want admittance to your own domicile. whether you want a key to get in. I mean, it's such an invasive way.
It's not in public housing now, correct?
No, it's not.
You're trying to block it from
I want to
getting
make
there.
sure that, the most vulnerable populations in our city are not subjected to a technology because it's a brilliant idea for someone else, but doesn't take into account the privacy concerns of the individuals who reside there.
Talking about the vulnerable, how about the 400,000 living in public housing and NYCHA housing in this city?
Yes.
I mean, living in such deplorable conditions, lead exposure, mold, no heat, no hot water. We have a federal monitor in there now. I know you sent a letter to the federal monitor calling for change, but they look at it and they say what we need. We need $32 billion right now to correct the immediate problems, but then we need more from Washington.
It's a result. It's a result of the neglect of Washington, D.C. Many of the public housing across this nation was developed by the federal government, and we have an obligation and responsibility as landlords, as partners, to help maintain it. I have a bill, the Hardest Hit Housing Act of 2019, that would do just that. That would allocate the funding that is required to bring these living conditions up to code and to make sure that individuals are living in dignity in their homes in New York City and across this nation.
But we need more money from Washington.
Absolutely.
That's what we kept hearing. How do we release those purse strings?
Well, again, it's a battle. We're dealing with an administration that has been focused on tax cuts for the wealthy. That takes a lot of the tax dollars that we need to be able to do infrastructure, to improve on our public housing, away from our access to it.
Congresswoman, we have a couple of minutes left. Let's shift gears. Let's talk a few minutes about politics.
Yes.
People love talking about politics, right? Have the Democrats lost their way?
I don't believe so. I think the Democrats are leading the way, quite frankly. Right now, we're dealing with an administration that is not offering the American people anything in terms of policy, in terms of law. We have been fighting since Donald Trump has come into office about building a border wall. That same money building a border wall could be fixing our public housing. We know that climate change is happening. We're in the midst of it. Yet, we are not doing what we need to do to regulate carbon emissions in the United States of America. There are so many issues that we are advancing as Democrats that the Republicans have turned a blind eye to, that it's making it extremely, extremely difficult to make progress.
So if I could play devil's advocate for a moment, you look at the other side, you look at the Trump administration, regardless of what's going on and what you're investigating, the economy is thriving. The latest employment report shows 125,000 more people on the job.
Well, and we hope that continues. There are some.
You can't take that away from them.
Like I said, we hope that continues. There are some indications, however, that the economy is getting sluggish. And so we can't rely on that solely as an indicator of the well-being of the people of the United States of America. When we have fires raging in California, we have flooding in the Midwest, in the Southwest, all of that is a cost to the American people. We didn't even get into health care and what is happening in that arena, where individuals are being sold a bill of goods in terms of junk policies that don't cover pre-existing conditions. There are a whole host of 21st century issues that the American people are facing that the Republicans in the House of Representatives and the Senate, as well as Donald Trump, have neglected to address, and we're going to have to really move to get this done.
The question I ask, and I think it's the thought of American people, how fast can you get this thing wrapped up?
Well, you're speaking about...
Talking about the impeachment, getting all that up, gets back to the business at hand
Again,
of these issues of immigration, infrastructure.
Well, first of all, there has to be a will to want to advance those issues, and we're seeing that there is no will coming from the Republican Party. So The impeachment, how quickly we'll wrap that up, it remains to be seen. But I will be doing an impeachment town hall next week in my district so that people are educated, because that's what's most important right now.
7-term Congresswoman from Brooklyn, Yvette Clark, thank you. It's so good to have you on PIX11
Thank you
Closeup.
for having me.
Hope you come back.
I look forward to it, Marvin.
Okay, thank you. And that'll do it for our program for this week. If you have any comments or wish to see this broadcast again, log on to our website at pix11.com/news closeup. Up next, Greta Van Susteren and Full Court Press. I'm Marvin Scott. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone.